This is a Ford Mustang. More to the point, this is my Ford Mustang. It's a 5-litre, naturally aspirated V8 beast. Manual gearbox, lively at the back end. I'll admit, not a lot of people can handle this car, and it's not exactly practical, and it's not exactly fashionable in today's world. But I love it, even if to a lot of people it's probably a bit of a dinosaur.
Cars like this won't be around for much longer. They're being replaced by cars like this. The world is going electric, and Ford has had to go with it. This is the all-new Mustang Mach-E, a new breed of Mustang powered not by dinosaur juice, but by electrons. This is Ford's attempt to conquer an electric future, hurtling towards the car industry at breakneck speed. But how does it compare to its rivals, and does it deserve the iconic badge?
I'm not going to judge. Well, I am going to judge because it's my job to judge, but I'm not going to bring any of my old school Mustang preconceptions to the party. I'm just going to evaluate this car on its own merits. And it's an SUV, isn't it? It's about the size of a BMW X3 or a Nissan Qashqai, but they've tried to shoehorn a bunch of Mustang elements into it. So you got the horse on the front, no Ford badges at all, by the way. They're leaning into the Mustang thing very heavily. You've also got a set of very squinty looking Mustang-esque headlights with some vertical elements in it, which is quite reminiscent of the standard car. And then you've got a very long bonnet with some very unfortunate looking handlebar mustache-esque plastic glossy sections on the front. But the advantage of having a very long bonnet is that you can get frunky. What we have here is a 100-litre front trunk, and it is very useful for carrying extra bits and bobs. Slightly annoyingly, depending on how you look at this, it's been partitioned. What that means is you can't get a large bag in there unless you remove the partition, but it also means that your groceries won't go rattling around. Side note, if you're a manufacturer and your EV hasn't got a front trunk, if all you've got is a bunch of electronics, I'm looking at you, VW ID3, yeah? Mercedes EQC, you're doing it wrong. Right, follow me around the back. All right, round the back, probably this car's best angle by far. I love the muscular haunches, by the way, really strong, very Mustang. Also very Mustang are these tri-bar LEDs around the back, which are straight off the sports car. What isn't very Mustang is the fact that this car has a large boot and a motorized tailgate. Before I show you the boot, it's also got the world's worst parcel shelf. This car is what, 57 grand? This parcel shelf is from Poundland.
No matter, because that flimsy parcel shelf also doubles as a blanket.
If you ignore that, what you get is a 400-litre boot, loads of room in there for all your bits and bobs, large suitcases, etc. And there's even a hidden partition underneath with all your cableage, Type 2 and standard 3-pin. I should probably mention as well that this parcel shelf, I'm not letting it go. It's actually snapped off. This section is meant to hook into the tailgate, but this is snapped off completely. This is the second time it's happened to me on a Ford. It happened in the Puma ST, and it's happened again on the Mustang Mach-E. Ford, please fix this, because this is, I'm not having this. I'm not having this. Sort it out immediately. Follow me around the side. You might notice this car has a slightly unusual roofline. There's a black glossy section just here, and then a body colored section below it. The body colored section is just there to make it look like a coupe, to give it a more sporty look. The actual roof is the darker section, which means that for the first time in a Mustang, you get loads of headroom, apart from in my convertible where there's infinite headroom. I'll show you that in just a second, but let me show you the doors because they're really cool. How do you get into this car? Well, there's a couple of options. On the driver's side B-pillar, there's actually a keypad that allows you to tap in your own personal code and the car will unlock, or you can use the traditional key, or you can use your mobile phone as a key. Once you've used one of those three methods, then you push a button on the B-pillar and the door opens using actuators, little motors that open it very stylishly for you. Then you use this little weird door handle thing to get it open the rest of the way. Why is the door handle this shape? Apparently it's for better aerodynamics, and I would believe you, Ford, if it wasn't for this enormous wing mirror in the way. On the back, pretty similar deal. Press a button, the thing opens, and now I shall reveal, as promised, the headroom.
In the back, it's really roomy, with loads of space for people over 6 foot tall and with good legroom. It also has a totally flat floor, which makes it easier to sit in the center seat, and has loads of cubby space, cup holders in the middle, and a couple of USB ports. The car also has dedicated vents for rear passengers, although not 4-zone climate control. Up front, the Mach-E looks good, with a modern interpretation of the Mustang's double bubble dashboard. It has a thin screen ahead of the driver for all driving related data, wireless charging mats in the center console, plenty of cubbies and storage, comfortable electric seats, and of course, that infotainment display.
I really like this. It's an enormous 15.5-inch touchscreen in portrait orientation. It's bigger than the display you get in the Tesla Model 3. Ford are leaning quite heavily into the virtual buttons thing, but they've stuck with one very, very important button, and that is the volume knob. You twist it and it's integrated directly into the screen itself. And that controls the volume on this beautiful looking B&O soundbar, which sounds tremendous, by the way. I'll talk you through a little bit of the functionality. So all of your climate controls are on the bottom level right here. They're permanently there, so they never get lost. Really easy to use. And then you've got your main menu up here on the top, giving you short access to things like the radio, phone, navigation, and even Waze is built in as well. But if you don't like any of that, you can use Apple CarPlay, connect your mobile phone, and use that, or Android Auto if that's what you prefer. But on the whole, decent system. Now we're on the road, I want to talk about the name. A lot of people hate the fact that this car is called a Mustang. Me? Not that fussed. I understand why Ford has done it. See, the thing is, they had to make a splash with their new big electric car. They couldn't afford to release a new car after spending billions in R&D and then have people look at it, shrug, and then go buy a Tesla. No, they had to make an enormous impact in the EV world, and they had to do that with their most popular nameplate. I mean, think about it. Nobody wants an electric Ford Focus or a Ficus, and nobody wants a electrified Ford Galaxy. Galaxy. You can have that Ford, by the way. I just have some royalties. And they couldn't have called it Mach-E on its own because it's a brand new name, and nobody's interested in a brand new name. Think about cars like the Mercedes EQC or Jaguar I-Pace. Fantastic electric cars, but did they make as big a splash as maybe Mercedes and Jaguar had expected? I would argue not. So, Mustang it is. Let's get over it. Now that that's out of the way, what's the Mustang Mach-E like to drive? Well, you know what? The first thing you notice is the suspension. It's a little bit jiggly. It's a little bit, I wouldn't say firm, but I'd say the damping isn't as good as I'd expected. It's a bit kind of porridgey, a bit knobbly. It really shows up imperfections in the road. I'm on a relatively smooth road right now, and yet I can still feel vibrations coming up through the cabin. It's a lot like my Mustang S550 V8. In fact, I would actually say that my car is probably a bit smoother, has better damping, even though it has lowered suspension. I'd say they've tuned this car to try and imitate the feel you get from a proper Mustang sports car, but I'm not 100% sure that it suits an SUV.
The next thing you notice is the steering, which could definitely be improved. It's a bit unresponsive around the dead center, but then gets maybe too responsive once you start to turn left or right. It's not very linear or consistent, but after about an hour on the road, you do start to forget about those issues.
There are 3 driving modes in the Mustang Mach-E. The first is Whisper, and that's your kind of quietest, most economical mode. Everything's whisper quiet, as you might expect. Then there's Active, which is slightly more active, a bit sportier. It makes the steering a little bit more resistive. It makes the throttle response a little bit sharper, and just makes the car feel a little bit more alive. Then there's Untamed. Push that button and that's essentially your Sport Plus mode, where the car comes truly alive. The ambient lights in the footwell glow red and the car suddenly feels a lot more eager. And you also get this propulsion sound, Ford call it. They've designed it, I don't know if you can hear that, to kind of mimic the noise you get from a V8 Mustang. Sounds nothing like a V8 Mustang, by the way, but it definitely adds to the driving experience and makes you feel a little bit more involved with the car. Plus, if you don't like it, you can turn it off.
The Mach-E is quiet, so you'll occasionally hear the noise of the road and the tires intruding into the cabin, but the peacefulness outweighs the occasional annoyance. It's even quiet on the motorway, with absolutely no wind noise, even at 70 miles an hour. It lacks the autopilot features of Teslas, but it can hold its lane fairly well on a motorway and follow traffic without the need for pedals.
This car has the option of one pedal driving. You can switch it on or off depending on what suits you. With one pedal driving switched on, you can accelerate with the accelerator and then lift off, and the car will brake and even come to a complete standstill. It's quite aggressive, but I actually quite like it, and it means that you don't really have to concentrate on moving your foot from one pedal to the other. I know, first world problems having to move your foot, but yeah, that's just how I roll. My one complaint is the fact that you can't adjust the amount of brake regen you get in the car. You have to stick with only one level.
As for performance, at launch in the UK, the Mach-E is available in a few different versions, including an entry-level rear-wheel drive model with one motor offering 265 horsepower and a top-spec all-wheel drive model with two motors delivering a healthy 346 horsepower. That's not as much as the 400 horsepower I-Pace or the 408 horsepower Polestar 2, but Ford is promising a faster performance edition later down the line.
This is the all-wheel drive extended range, and it's actually pretty enjoyable to drive, but not for the reasons you might think. Electric cars are known for their straight line acceleration. Straight line acceleration in this is good, 0 to 60 in 5.5 seconds, but where it really excels is with the handling. When you chuck it into a bend, what you find is that there's very little, if any, body roll in this car. The batteries are mounted so low down in the vehicle that the center of gravity is rock bottom, and that means it's so composed through the corners. There's loads of traction on the exit thanks to all-wheel drive acceleration, and it's just a really, really capable car through the bends. I don't know if I'm having fun, but I'm not alarmed like I would be in certain cars. There are cars like the Mercedes EQC which are faster than this in a straight line, but through a bend, it wouldn't see where a Mustang Mach-E went, trust me. The brakes are really good as well. They're consistent, they're strong, really confidence inspiring. You can chuck it into a corner and have total trust in this car. I like it. And check this out, as you go into a corner, you can get on the power and it starts to rotate a little bit. It actually starts to step out like a proper Mustang. I don't know if I'm enjoying it, certainly not in the same way that I might enjoy doing that in my own car, but the fact that Ford have dialed that into the Mustang Mach-E to give it that little sense of oversteer, that's quite commendable. I respect that. I think one key question you've got to ask yourself when you're driving a car that costs this much money is, how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel important? I think the answer is, yeah, the Mach-E does make me feel good when I drive it. And I think a lot of that is from this really, really nice cabin. It feels quite upmarket, and I love the fact that it's got so much tech inside it. I really, really like this big screen. Some people might complain that it doesn't have as many toys as you get in a Tesla Model 3, for example. There's no karaoke mode, there's no fart noises when you indicate, and there's no Netflix, etc. I think there's two ways of looking at that. One is that the Mach-E is lacking in a few features, or you could look at it like the Mach-E is just a much more serious, grown-up car. I'll leave that one for you to decide.
As for range, well, that will depend on which version you go for. The rear-wheel drive versions have the best range, while the all-wheel drive models have the best performance. The car that goes the furthest is the rear-wheel drive extended range, rated at 379 miles on a single charge, 20 more than an equivalent Model 3. I won't mention the Model Y as yet, as that's not out in the UK right now, and we don't have official UK mileage figures. This all-wheel drive extended range Mach-E I'm driving today officially delivers 335 miles, but in my hands, on a cold winter's day, it delivered closer to 250.
As for charging, it's worth talking about. It's not always going to be seamless in any electric car, and that includes the Mach-E. I pulled up into this bay today and I had a couple of issues. I learned that the charging port is on the front left of this car, which means that on some bays, the cable might not reach. So I don't know whose fault that is. That might be Ford's for not choosing a more centrally located charging port, or maybe the likes of Polar from BP Pulse should have chosen longer cables on their charge bays. But anyway, a bit of a palaver having to move from one bay to another to make sure that the cable could reach. In terms of recharging, well, you can top up overnight from a 7 kilowatt wall box in around 11 hours, or you can use rapid charging. There are two rapid charging options in the Mach-E. The standard range car can top up at a rate of 115 kilowatts, and this extended range car can top up at speeds of up to 150 kilowatts. That means that you can top up an extra 73 miles of range in around 10 minutes. Sadly, this is only a 50 kilowatt charger. I'm trying to do the mental maths here, but essentially that means it's going to take around twice as long, 3 times as long in fact. Again, not as quick as a Tesla supercharger, which can work at up to 250 kilowatts, meaning they can add 73 miles of range in around 5 minutes. But here we are, it's plugged in and it's working. Not detected. Welcome to the future.
On the whole, I think Ford have done a very good job with this. Firm suspension and vague steering aside, I really like it. I think it's better than the EQC, it's cheaper and has better range than a Jaguar I-Pace, and it's slightly nicer and more practical than a VW ID.3. On the whole, this is a great car. The question is though, is it a great Mustang?
The answer, honestly speaking, is no. When Fiat launched the Fiat 500X, was that really a Fiat 500? And if Porsche launched a new SUV version of the 911 and called it the 911 Max, would it be a 911? I don't think so. This is very clearly a marketing exercise, albeit a very good marketing exercise. So no, it's not a very good Mustang, but it is a very, very good car.
The good news though is that this isn't here to kill the V8, at least not immediately. The Mach-E is a car for the weekdays, for family life, and the V8 is for everything else. They complement each other well. Of course, Ford will be forced to stop the sale of new V8s in the UK at some point, and the only new Mustangs left will naturally be electric, so the Mach-E is very much a car for the future, and credit to it. But let's be glad that Ford still gives us an option to celebrate the past.